Welcome to Three Films and a Podcast, the show where Destiny brought together three friends to enhance each other's cinematic journey by watching three new movies in a series of themed rounds. There is no claim of ownership on any film footage used in this episode, as all film footage is owned in its entirety by the copyright holders. And just like every car in Too Fast, Too Furious, this podcast contains spoilers. Enjoy! Hello, everyone, and welcome to Three Films and a Podcast. My name is Ben Lawhorn, and I am joined, as always, by Tyler Beck and Matt Weiler. Matt, who's in a new location for the first time ever.
Yeah, you can day for the pod.
Yeah, this is crazy.
Yeah, I'm excited. Happy to be phoning in here.
Yeah, it's East Coast.
Hello,
Matt.
Everyone.
It's a whole different Matt. We have no idea what's going to happen tonight with East Coast Matt, but
all bets are off.
For those of you new to the show, welcome to the Movie Club. For those of you returning, welcome back to the Movie Club. We are Three Films and a Podcast. You can find us everywhere at Three Films Pod. We also have a website, threefilmspod.com. We'd appreciate you telling anyone and everyone, just stop people on the street and tell them to listen to us, however you need to do it.
Cold calls.
We would appreciate that.
What you got to do?
Cold calls. Yeah. We started a calling center. Excuse me, sir. Have you heard of Three Films and a Podcast? All right. It is February. It is Black History Month. Yes, it is. And we are on to the second movie of our Black History Movies round, which was selected by Tyler, nominated by Tyler. Last week, we talked about Daughters of the Dust, which was a great conversation. I'm glad that we watched that movie. But yeah, being February, being Black History Month, we wanted to go through some Black History movies this month and kind of talk about those. So again, we talked about Daughters of the Dust last week. It's interesting going through these three movies, what periods, I guess, in Black history they're going to cover, because I feel like Daughters of the Dust is like a much different time. My selection today, I went with Spike Lee's Da 5 Bloods, which is like, obviously like 60s, the Vietnam War, all that kind of stuff. Then next week we'll be talking about Judas and the Black Messiah, which I'm very excited to cover. But we're doing Da 5 Bloods today. The IMDb tagline said 4 African-American vets battle the forces of man and nature when they return to Vietnam, seeking the remains of their fallen squad leader and the gold fortune he helped them hide. This cast is like as stacked as those gold bricks. You know what I mean? Like there's
Totally.
like so many great people here. We got Chadwick Boseman, Delroy Lindo, Clark Peters, Norm Lewis, Jonathan Majors, and Mr. She himself, Isaiah Whitlock Jr. I was so glad we got one of those.
So happy.
I was like, oh, we've got to get that. Like he can't be in a movie and not do that. So I was so happy that we finally heard it.
If it's in his contract, like
it's gotta be, right?
like, look, that's my thing. I have to say shit for 30 seconds.
This was an extended one, which I liked quite a bit.
Good one.
Yeah, I mean, I chose this movie, honestly, like it kind of goes back to the first round we ever did on Spike Lee joints, which was also a Tyler selection. And Matt, I think you had seen this movie before, right? You'd seen this previously. Mm-hmm. And I think you had recommended it maybe in a couple of our Rushmores. I was like, okay, I need to check it out. But just like everyone else's problem, it's just like in the queue of everything that we need to watch. Mm-hmm. And I just hadn't gotten around to it. So when this came up as the nomination for the round, it was like, oh, this is the perfect opportunity to finally sit down and watch this movie. I really enjoy Spike Lee's movies. I'm sure we'll talk about it in a little bit. We did a director's rounds afterwards. We talked about the Spielbergisms, and there's definitely a lot of Spike Lee-isms. We've got a few in this movie as well, so I'm sure we'll hit on that. But yeah, it was just something that I for some reason hadn't gotten around to yet, and I'm super glad that we did. But Tyler, this was a first watch for you, is that right?
Yeah, just kind of, just like what you said, it's been on the list for a while. I didn't know anything about it. I tried to go in as like blind as possible. Like I didn't know it had anything to do with Vietnam until I started it, basically.
Yeah.
I didn't know who was in it. I saw that Chadwick was in it, but for whatever reason, I just wanted to keep it completely fresh when I went to watch it, because I just felt like with Spike, even though like there are certainly the Spikeisms and you sort of know what to expect, but you just don't know how you're going to get it. You know what I mean? Like I just feel like Spike always surprises me. Every movie I watch of his is different than I thought it was going to be. So I wanted to know, like, what is a movie going to be like of his that I don't know anything about? You know what I mean?
For sure.
Like, anyways, and I got to watch Alex watch this with me. So that was
cool.
fun too.
Nice.
And she really liked it. She cried a lot at the end.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Not awesome that she cried. Awesome that she watched it with you. But yeah, it's always a bonus.
She kind of cheated though. So I watched the first hour and then I had to stop it and pick it up the next day. So when I told her I was going to finish it, I caught her up to where we were.
Oh, okay.
She picked up the movie, spoiler alert, right when they find Otis's gun. You know what I mean?
Oh, like, yeah.
I stopped it right after that scene and I was okay, so here's what's happening. Here's what's going on. And she's like, that was the perfect way for me to watch a movie. You took out all, you just like filled me in. I just got to watch the best part. Which I do think the best part of this movie is everything that happens after that. I think it's like serendipitous that's where my break point was.
Yeah.
Because I feel like I hate being the guy that's like, every movie's too long, right? But I do think we could have lost, I don't know, 40 minutes out of this movie and I would have got almost the same thing. But even saying that, like, there was obviously things that Spike was trying to say. I mean, it's the most heavy-handed you could possibly do it with the messages he's trying to give you. Like, he's overtly hitting over your head, like, this is what happened. This has
very
been the
intentional.
Which I think is great. And I think it's something that, needs to be done and said. And I think it's something that people like me need to watch. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Even though I consider myself fairly aware, it is, I need it beat into my head a little bit more. You know what I mean?
For sure.
So it's hard for me to say I want it to be shorter because I understand that Spike was trying to say a lot and there's a lot of things he wanted to say and do. And then also, once that scene happens, once they are like in the jungle and right before they find the gold bars, like I felt like the pace was really well paced after that. And I was just hooked. Like, the more it went on, the more I liked this movie. Like, when it first started, I was like, I'm not sure if I like this. Like, I wasn't buying the chemistry between the characters. Like, the people playing the characters are charismatic and had chemistry, I felt like, but I just wasn't buying it with the characters. It took me a while to get into it, but then as soon as it hooked me, it just kept rolling and rolling and rolling. And I kept liking it more and more and more. And by the time it was over, I really, really liked this movie. But I think if I were to rewatch it, I would watch maybe a couple of scenes in that first hour and then just go to the last hour and a half. But again, I'm really glad we watched it. Every new Spike movie I watch, I like more and more. And it's cool to have watched, one of his very first or some of his very first to one of his most recent, because those Spikeisms, they just, to me, they were just like, he does a little bit more every time. I think my favorite one is those little double cuts that he does.
Yeah.
Like, if someone goes in for a hug, he shows it twice.
Yeah, get the opposite angle.
Yeah. And at first it was like, oh, come on, Spike. Like, the first time I saw it in I don't remember which movie it was. I was like, oh, come on, Spike. I don't like that. Whatever. Yeah. But then now every time he does it, I'm like, hell yeah, Spike, you put your fingerprint on this thing.
Right,
like,
exactly.
I don't know.
Yeah.
The more and more I watch the stuff, I like.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interject, but like along those lines, like there's one that when we're watching like the boat or whatever go down the river, and it's clearly a drone shot, and it's like static for a sec, and then once the boat comes through, then it starts to move with it, and it's like another director would have just like picked it up as we're moving, but Spike's like, well, I'm just going to show us sitting there for a second, then we'll go. It's like that's very much his thing, but on the other end, this movie does not really. As long as it is, he doesn't linger on any scenes. Like, once something happens, like cut, next thing, we're moving on, like he is just like, boom, like that whole gun situation, when like Jonathan Majors, like finally he's like, here, take it. And then Orlando grabs it and then just like, boom, instantly cut to the next day. It's like, oh, okay. We're not lingering on this whatsoever. So it was cool to see some of those Spikeisms for sure along the lines. Like, also obviously that like moving shot that he's like infamous for, like the end of Malcolm X and all that kind of stuff. Obviously the Philip Seymour Hoffman from 25th Hour in the Club, what's one of the other movies we covered. So it was cool to see that again. Matt, how was this for you on the rewatch?
It was good. On the podcast, or I guess just in our movie club group, we had covered Last Black Man in San Francisco.
Yeah.
We were all stoked on Jonathan Majors at that point. This was, not too long after the pandemic happened. And I remember just thinking like, holy crap, there's a movie with Jonathan Majors in it, Chadwick Boseman, a Spike Lee joint. Like I was like, this is awesome. This is going to be a small, glimmer of light in this, crappy situation. And so we'd watched it, and this came out, just a couple months before he passed. And so this was the last thing I saw him in, before all that. And so Stormin' Norman is always going to be like a character that resonates with me.
Without a doubt.
I thought, as Tyler pointed out, I thought the themes in this were very, very clear. But it was done in a really cool way. There was a movie that I had seen. It was a cartoon. It wasn't a Miyazaki movie, but it was from that studio.
From Ghibli, yeah.
Yeah, from Studio Ghibli, and it was called From Up on Poppy Hill.
Yeah.
It's about post-war Japan, and it's an era of Japan that we kind of just like aren't very aware of as Americans. We don't really explore that time period. And so that was like super interesting. And I felt that same thing watching this. You don't really think, there's not a ton of stories of the black soldiers that served in Vietnam.
Yeah.
And so it was super cool to see from that perspective. Yeah, I mean, what else did we get in pop culture? Bubba from Forrest Gump? Like, that's literally like the only other that I had.
Definitely none of them being the central characters.
Yeah, right.
Sure. Right. A lot of style, like in Platoon, there's obviously side characters, but
yeah. And I say that acknowledging that my my filmography of Vietnam movies is very limited. I'm sure I'm missing. So someone's gonna message in here and say you're an idiot. There's tons of movies about it, but anyways,
I'm gonna message it. I'm gonna message you that. You're an idiot.
Thank you for your comment, Ben.
I forgot to use my burner account. Oops.
No, but it was really cool to see that perspective. It was cool that Spike Lee sort of interjected some very, the things that you wouldn't normally think about in association with, soldiers in Vietnam, with like Otis's sort of sub storyline there. With the relationship that was very, very clearly happened there. So it's cool to see some of these things that like I literally never would have thought about.
Yeah.
If Spike Lee hadn't put this in a movie. And so that's kind of my first impressions. And and I'm always down to watch a Spike Lee joint. Like, even take the star power out of this, take Chadwick and Jonathan Majors out of this, and it's a Spike Lee movie. And so he's still kind of the star of this, in my opinion.
Yeah. When you're watching a Spike movie for sure. Yeah, man, this was a great watch. I had a really good time with it. I really liked the beginning with them establishing their just like relationship, like doing the handshake within like the first 5 minutes. It's like, okay, this is established. I didn't know Jonathan Majors was in it, so him showing up was a surprise to me. Like maybe I knew at some point, but I had forgotten. And I was like, oh shit, he's in, like, this is great. This is fantastic. So that was a pleasant surprise. But yeah, I love this. I love all the I don't know, camera trickery, I guess, of some sort, like changing the aspect ratio to let us know when we're at what time was awesome.
Because, I really like that.
Yeah, right. I thought it was kind of cool.
Great
like having the actors play themselves as their younger selves. I also didn't know that was happening. So I thought we were going to see like the younger actors, whatever. But then when I realized it's them, like, oh, okay, cool. This makes even more sense than why we're at the 4:3 aspect ratio. Because Spike's like, this is back then, and then we'll go back. And I also really enjoyed that it was just like, it was transitions. You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't like a cut to like 4:3 and 16:9. Like, it was just like we'd watch the framing change, which I thought was kind of cool to see that. I loved watching them play themselves back then as well. I think that can be difficult when you do that in a movie, when you're trying to, cast someone to play an older version. Like, I don't think anything's ever going to be Straight Outta Compton with O'Shea Jackson Jr. playing his dad, but there's only so many times you're able to do that. And so I think this device of just having the guys play their younger selves was really, really cool. Beautifully shot. Like it looked amazing. I think, Terrence Blanchard was on the soundtrack again. I mean, they've worked together so much. So the score was fantastic, but along those lines, the Marvin Gaye stuff was just amazing. Like I've never ever heard that a cappella version of What's Going On.
We've got to find a way to bring some loving here today. Oh.
And it's just crazy how differently something can hit you without the music behind it. Like when you're forced to just listen to the words, and just like the vocal talents and range of Marvin Gaye. And, that album is like kind of Marvin Gaye's response to Vietnam, like it's the narrative is, a soldier coming home after Vietnam. And so to use basically like 2/3 of that album as the soundtrack here was, again, like very intentional. Like Spike is not known for his subtlety, but I think that's what makes him Spike, Right. It's like, I'm gonna hit you over the fucking head with this. Like, we're using the Marvin Gaye songs from his Vietnam album for this Vietnam movie, and we're just really hitting it home. And it did, like, it worked so well. Like I know some of the reaction, I think when it first came out, was that some of that not live footage, but some of that stock whatever from back then, like the actual footage was too graphic or whatever. But it's also just like
brutal.
We need to see that though. You know what I mean? Like it's so brutal. Like we see children who are just like massacred. We see people. I mean, it's awful visuals to look at, but I don't think there's any other way to hit home just how bad it is. Cause like any of us that weren't there, I mean, none of us were even alive at the time, but like, how do you compare to it if you hadn't experienced it, And so this is, I think, Spike's attempt to be like, I want you guys to know what actually happened, like what people were actually suffering through at this time. And the guys talk about it in the movie as well. It's like they were sent by a country, like they were sent to serve a country that didn't even give them the same rights as other people. You know what I mean? Like they were forced to go represent America. Then they came home and it's like, oh, but also you don't have the same rights as like your white counterparts here that's also served. And it's like, it's crazy to think about that. And obviously Vietnam was just nuts in and of itself, but that's why I wanted to watch this, because I just felt like, while it may not have been like based on a true story or anything like that, I think these are all real experiences that people had gone through, like the gold bars aside, I figured like Spike's probably going to hit home what it was like to serve as a black man in Vietnam for a country that just honestly didn't even respect you, at all. And what goes into that. And he did, like, in spades. He hit that home, without a doubt. Yeah, I don't know. There's just so many great performances here. I loved all the Spike isms that we saw. I thought it was beautiful. I agree with you, Tyler. Like for me, there's probably like 20 minutes that could be trimmed here. But I think all that stuff at the beginning, even as extended and stuff as it is, like needs to be there to really hit home what's going on. But I had a really good time with it. There's some really funny stuff in here too. I mean, I don't know. We'll get into it, but yeah, I'm glad that you picked this theme, Tyler. And I'm stoked that we got to watch this movie together. Man, I mean, we've talked about some of the cast members. Obviously, I read that off at the beginning. Really, I mean, I had a hard time trying to figure out who our protagonist was. I mean, I think the first person we see, is it Isaiah Whitlock? I think like with the drink at the hotel or something.
I think so, yeah.
But it feels like Otis, who's played by Clark Peters, kind of seems like our protagonist for the most part, because he has one of the biggest side stories that we discover, with his old flame and daughter he didn't know about, so like, I don't know. Yeah. Oh yeah. By the way. But anyways,
all that so well. Like
how
old is she?
Yeah.
It was just like, he took it so in stride. I was like so thrown off by that, but I just like, okay, I guess that's not the story we're here to tell. So I was trying to figure out when to let it go, but
were we told when this was set? Like the time frame? Like is this like the 90s? So. I mean, there was no one had a cell phone the whole movie, you know, and true. If Vietnam, you know, sorry to any historians who are listening, I don't know the exact years that happened, but I feel like it was the late 60s, and he has like a 20-year-old something daughter, you know, like, so I feel like this was meant to take place in the early to mid 90s, but I may have missed the title card if there was one, but no cell phones, no nothing.
I don't remember it bothering me watching it. It kind of just felt like it made sense, you know, just,
same.
Yeah.
I think the main thing that I thought like stuck out to me is like when they're on that boat right at the beginning, you know, and everyone's like, hey, do you want the beers? Do you want chicken? Whatever. The one dude's got a video camera, and it is like kind of an old school handheld one.
Yeah.
You know, the film in it and stuff. I'm like, okay, so this isn't a digital camera at all. So we might kind of be in that time frame, but it didn't bother me. It more just like curious, you know, I was just like, oh, I wonder when this is, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't like add or subtract from the movie or the story at all. But all that long-winded nonsense to say that I don't know that there's like a clear protagonist here, you know?
Yeah.
But I wanted to kind of hand out our Apollonia Award essentially for who our favorite part of this movie was, who we feel like maybe we're going to remember after, you know, when we talk about this with somebody or when we think about it in 4 months, like who's going to stick out to you from this movie. Matt, I'm going to throw it to you first. Who's your Apollonia winner?
I gotta go Storm and Norman, baby. I gotta go Chadwick. When I watched this, I was surprised at how, and it's not that his character wasn't prominent. Obviously, like in some ways, he is like the main character of the movie.
Yeah.
Just because he ties this group and this mission together, but
he's the rug. You know?
Yeah,
he really ties this mission together.
Yeah. Check out our episode of Big Lebowski. If you want to know what that's from, check out our episode of Big Lebowski.
You want to get that reference?
But I was surprised when I watched it, how much less he was in it than I thought he was going to be.
Yeah.
That said, I felt like when he was, every scene that he was in was just like so impactful, and it's just like such a cool character, and you could just get the sense of how much these dudes looked up to him, how much like weight he carried. And by the end of the movie, it's like, is Storm and Norman one of my favorite characters of all time? Like, this dude is awesome.
He was fantastic. Yeah, like you said, he has to make the most of his scenes because almost all of them are in flashback. Obviously, at the end, we see him not in the flashback, kind of in a dream sequence, but that hit me so hard. That last moment between him and Delroy was fantastic. But yeah, Chadwick, he was so good in this. He did a wonderful job. Tyler, who's your Apollonia winner?
I'm going to let you say who my real answer is, Ben, because I think we have the same answer here.
Yeah.
And for me, I think my answer would have been Storm and Norman up until about the last 30 minutes when Ben's answer just takes over for me. We'll talk about it when you get into it, Ben, but I got to shout out my boy Lester Freeman from The Wire.
Nice.
Isaiah Whitlock was in there too, but Clark Peters, he played Otis, he played Lester Freeman. Lester's one of my favorite characters in The Wire, and I felt, if I'm being honest, I sort of felt like Otis was the same, you know what I mean? It was just like, oh, it's Lester that went to war, like that's cool. And that's not totally fair. I thought like I bought Otis as a character, but I hear that the rich timbre of Lester Freeman's voice, and I can't help it. I love The Wire so much. So I want to shout out Clark Peters, shout out The Wire. I know this is a movie podcast, and I know at some point we said we don't talk about TV here.
We absolutely do not talk about TV.
Never. This is all being cut.
I think we could break the rules for, in my opinion, probably the greatest television program of all time. I said it. That's right.
That's right.
You take The Sopranos and stick. Just kidding.
All you Big Bang Theory fans, shove it. You know.
I don't have that strong of opinions. I just love that show, and yeah. But Ben, your answer, to me, I think is the right answer. He stole the show for me, especially honestly the last like half of the movie for me. But
yeah, he was amazing. Was Isaiah Whitlock, for some reason I thought he was in The Wire too? Was he not in The Wire?
He is.
Oh, okay. Cool.
He plays Clay Davis, Senator.
Oh, nice. All right, perfect. Yeah, I mean, my selection, and I cheated, I guess, 'cause I put this down first, but it's Delroy Lindo. Like, he's just awesome, like in everything that he's in. I still, whenever I see him, my first experience with him was in a movie that I love, and it's probably like a guilty pleasure movie. At the time I thought like, whoa, this is really well done, this is a great film. But it's him in Gone in 60 Seconds, the guy who's chasing after Nick Cage. It's like he's the cop that's going after him.
Look, I don't know what you boys are looking for, but I just got back, okay? It was a family emergency. Now that's the truth.
Family emergency? Yeah, I got a family emergency too, Randall. I gotta go tell my woman that I just lost $200 on a stupid deal.
She's mean.
What?
She can be mean.
And I think about that every single time that he's on screen. I was like, oh fuck, I need to watch Gone 60 Seconds again, man. Like, I love that movie so much. But he's just like, yeah, he's fantastic in this. Spike has him playing a character who's like essentially like a right-wing Republican. He's like pro-Trump.
Yeah.
They kind of give him shit about that at the beginning, which is funny. Spike does not pull any punches on Trump in this movie at all. Like, no. He's just like, not even just like a vague hint at it. It's like, oh, I'm just going to call him out by name.
Yeah, just straight up. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's interesting just to hear like Delroy's, like his character's, reasoning for that, all that kind of stuff. But he also probably has like the most impressive arc, I think, of this whole film, which is probably why he's like the quote unquote right answer, because we know even before Jonathan Majors as his son shows up, like we already know like he's struggling being in Vietnam, like it is messing with his brain, his emotions, all that. And then his son comes up and just like muddles the situation, because now he has to deal with that. And then, we learn later on about like why he and his son have their issues that they do, all the gold, all that kind of stuff. He has, I think, one of the best scenes, a very Spike heavy scene where it's like the fourth wall straight to the camera as he's walking through the jungle. He's like, they're not going to take my gold. They're not taking, what's his name? Paul. Yeah. It's like, they're not getting Paul's gold. And it's a long take, and it's all like done in one shot, and it's so well done.
But he nails it, dude. That's what I wanted to talk about that Spikeism earlier, but I knew we were going to talk about him here. And that's one of my favorites, just that fourth wall break, the angry monologue to the camera. And he nails this one, dude. Like, it's so good.
It's so good. And like,
Lord.
It just speaks to how good of an actor he is, because there's a part where he kind of like repeats some stuff. And I was like, oh, did he kind of forget like the lines or where he's going here? And then just like continues going. He's like, oh no, like that was supposed to look like that. Like he's just a fucking professional and he knows what he's doing. And it's so well done. So yeah, he has a really interesting arc all the way up to the end. It's like heartwarming to see what happens, I guess, with him and Chadwick, when he lifts up his shirt, when Chadwick lifts up his shirt and he's like, you got to come clean about this, and forgives him and stuff. And it's like, oh, this is why Stormy Norman's been in his dreams every single night since Vietnam, because he's carried this guilt of having accidentally killed him. And he plays it so well, and he puts up this guard. And then again, like we find out that he lost his wife when his son was born. And so, you can't help but think about that every time he sees his son. And so has that resentment there. Like he's just got so much going on. And I think Delroy does just gives a beautiful performance here. Yeah, I think he did a wonderful job. I was trying to remember. I want to say he was like nominated, but I could be wrong. I guess the score was nominated, but I thought Delroy got nominated for something. But yeah, I don't know. He gave a wonderful performance. So I think Paul would be my pick for this as far as my Apollonia winner. So, but really great stuff from everyone. Isaiah Whitlock,
totally.
Jonathan Majors coming in and like fitting in with all those guys. Like, yeah, I don't know. Wonderful job. I mean, I just talked about like one of the great scenes that we had in this movie, which is the fourth wall walk and talk, kind of from Paul, as he's like separating from the group for his gold and stuff. I think that's a wonderful scene that you could show someone to really sell them on this movie. But I think it's time to officially go into our elevator pitch.
Before we get started, does anyone want to get out?
And I want each of us to kind of pick a scene that we would show somebody to basically convince them to watch this movie. Obviously, the conceit behind this is that you're stuck in an elevator with someone and they want to know what it is you're watching. And so we get to choose a scene that we would show them from this movie to sell them on it. Tyler, I'm going to throw it to you first. What's your elevator pitch?
That's awesome. I have an answer for you, but I also had a segment idea just pop in my head.
Yeah.
We should do the opposite of the elevator pitch. Like, what scene would you be most weirded out by if someone looked over your shoulder in the elevator? And that's the scene you were on.
I think it's usually
what I mean?
That is my elevator pitch.
Yeah, totally.
That's true.
Like, what the freak is this guy watching?
So we could, so we could have the elevator pitch, and then we could have the awkward airplane pitch, right? Like someone in the seat behind you, like you realize, like, oh shit, like I'm in public watching this.
Yeah. It's like when your parents walk in on like the one sex scene. It's like, no, the whole movie isn't this. You just walked in at the wrong part. Like, it's not this.
I'm not enjoying this.
I mean, I will say in this impromptu segment, for me, it's any of the gore scenes, like the headshot at the beginning of the archival footage. That was like stomach turning. And then the very first landmine scene was. We know how I feel about gore. That was a lot.
Yeah, I'm in that boat too. And
I thought, God, gore and snakes. This movie has it all.
Gore and snakes.
Only one snake though.
Yeah, thankfully.
I had a hard time coming up with one for this. I mean, mainly I had a hard time whittling it down.
Yeah.
There was a few elevator pitches I wanted to give. So I'm gonna go with the Hanoi Hannah scene where she reads that, or she does the monologue, the Black GI monologue.
Black GI. In Memphis, Tennessee, a white man assassinated Dr. Martin Luther King, who heroically opposed the cruel racial discrimination in the USA. I just found that really gripping. I think she's a very interesting person that apparently is real. I just learned about her from this movie. And I just thought that was like a fascinating aspect of the story and a fascinating aspect of the history of the war. And I just got to thinking of that being like the central point upon which all these soldiers could be connected to each other, right? Like you get your orders from command and you see the people in your squadrons and whatever, but like, they're all there. They're all able to listen to Hanoi Hannah at the same time and have that experience, just the way that would like tie you together. And then just the monologue that she's giving and the visuals we're seeing. I just thought it was a really cool scene and it just gave me a lot to think about. And I think it was like the type of scene that Spike is so good at, right? Because he's not, like you said, Ben, he's not known for subtlety, but it was so artistically done and so thoughtful and poignant and frankly easy to understand, right? Like sometimes a dummy like me just needs you to tell me like, this is what I'm mad about. This is what I want you to know about. Here's some pretty stuff to go along with it and some pretty words, but like, here is the issue. Here's what you need to think about.
Yeah.
And I appreciated that. And I thought it was really cool. So yeah, I don't know. I love the Hanoi Hannah scene. I will say I also really loved the river trip, just them cruising down the river. I thought that was just interesting. It sort of reminded me of, I've never done that before. I've had similar adventures, like being in a completely foreign place with, seeing the way people are living and just those interactions with the people on the street selling you stuff. I don't know.
Yeah.
I just thought it was a cool like adventure scene, like a little road trip scene.
Yeah.
And, but my real answer is Hanoi Hannah.
Nice. I like that. Yeah. Some of the stuff that was in there, we've talked about it here. You and I worked at the airport, kind of reminded me of a trip we took to Cambodia, like even like the temple thing at the end was super cool. Obviously just being, I think it's literally connected to Vietnam. So it kind of makes sense at all, looks the same, but Yeah, that's awesome. Hanoi Hannah was great. Like it made me think felt like a very intentional, almost like reference to the Mr. Love Daddy, Samuel L. Jackson, and Do the Right Thing.
This is Mr. Senior Love Daddy, your voice of choice, the world's only 12-hour strong man on the air, here on We Love Radio 108 FM, the last on your dial, but first in your hearts, and that's the truth. Root.
His radio, I want the show with the two of them, at the radio station.
Yeah.
I love that. But yeah, no, that's a wonderful selection. Matt, what is your elevator pitch?
So when I think about this movie, the movie that I think of is this movie. The scene that I always think about is, and a scene that I just absolutely loved, and I'll build it back. I'll build it up for those listening who haven't seen this movie, but it's the scene where Jonathan Majors steps on a landmine.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, they're wandering through the woods, and there's already some drama around Jonathan Majors being there to begin with. He insisted on being there,
mm-hmm.
and to Ben's point earlier, Jonathan Majors is just like, he just gels right in with this group. It's pretty cool. He's not overplaying his part at all, but he's holding up. Which I think this is his second movie, right?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, so it's been great to see him just explode, really. But anyway, let's talk about a scene where he doesn't explode.
Where he doesn't explode.
And so he steps. So this scene builds up sort of the drama, not just of like the characters' conflict amongst each other, but also just the precarious environment that they're in. This dangerous wilderness, Vietnamese wilderness, where there's still active landmines anywhere, and they're not really equipped to be wandering around this area. Anyway, Jonathan Majors steps on it, and he knows that he stepped on it, and it just adds this really great drama. But it leads to just like these really great moments of just a really great moment of this team like working together to try to save this guy's life.
Yeah,
because he's basically like stepped on his death, and it just like it puts you in that situation, kind of like you can kind of like, you're kind of Jonathan Majors in that situation, like, holy crap, like I'm dead, basically.
Yeah. You're literally standing on your impending doom.
And I think like you assume that he's gonna make it out of there, but like you don't know. Like it's a Spike Lee movie, like you don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, just like minutes earlier, we saw Eddie step on one and blow up, so it's just like, okay, I guess anyone's fair game here.
And I
don't know about you guys, but from the second Jonathan Majors found that first gold bar until Eddie blew up, I had like, my anxiety was through the roof. Like Alex and I were like holding hands. I'm like, hey, because I had to put, I'm like, okay, it's well set up in this movie, and like, it's established in history that like there are landmines everywhere in Vietnam from this war. And there's already been talk about cleaning up landmines. We've seen people with amputations. Like, so we're sitting there like, we could barely watch the screen. I was like, are they going to blow up Jonathan Majors? Like,
seriously,
it was barely enjoyable.
Totally. Absolutely. And I kind of liked just another layer to this, since we're talking Black history, and just this movie just oozes with Black pride, which is just like so great to see. And Jonathan Majors is wearing his Morehouse shirt. That kind of plays into, sort of like the hype, or like, how do you hype yourself into not dying? You know what I mean? Like, it's just a pretty insane scene. And I just remember when they yank him, like, I just remember audibly like cheering.
Yeah.
Like, I was just as stoked as the characters in the movie. So that's gotta be like, I didn't really have any other choice but to choose that scene.
Yeah.
I think that's great. I mean, that scene that you talked about, when Delroy was trying to like pump him up, it's like, where did you go to school? He's like, the house. He's like, yeah. What, like, who else went to the house? And I don't remember the person's name. And I should, but we see the image of the hurdler, right? Like, they did the hurdles. Yeah. They're talking about like, and why was he so good? And John Major, like, cause he only took 13 steps and everyone else took 15. And like, he could fly across. And he's like, cool, what are you going to do? He's like, I'm going to fly. It's like, say it again, I'm going to fly, just like let's get everyone fucking amped, like let's go.
Yeah.
In my brain, I'm just like, have we established, is this like 1, 2, 3 pull or 1, 2 pull? Like I'm like worried about that.
Same thing. I was like, you have to have this conversation. This is the most important. This isn't rock, paper, scissors, guys. Like you have. When are we going? On the 3?
Exactly. I thought maybe for comedic effect, someone was going to be like, with Paul Walterhauser there, it's like, oh, he's going to be like, oh, wait, guys. I was like, we're going to clarify this, but nope, we just go for it. But if that was my son on that landmine, I'd be like, hey, you guys, it's 1, 2, 3, then we pull. Like nobody pull on 3 because I don't want to, whatever. But yeah, that I also didn't know too, like with all the suspense, like, I wonder if this is going to be a dud, like if we're just building all the suspense and it's not going to be, active, but it was a great scene. It was super cool. The idea of showing the archival footage and the photos of all these people that they're talking about plays throughout the whole movie, which is awesome. I mean, they talked about someone earlier who was like the first person to die. Was it like was it the Civil War? I don't remember exactly which war it was, but like it was a black person was the first one to die. Yeah, exactly. So I don't know, just it was really interesting to see all that, all the different references and just see that on screen. It's very cool. It feels like something that like if a lesser director did it, it would come across like this is very amateurish. But when it's Spike, it's like, oh, this is intentional. This is like supposed to be here. Spike knows he's doing whatever.
Yep.
For me, just it's one of the beginning scenes. It's the first time that they're like in that club, even just starting out with them dancing, it's like, oh man, like, this is what these guys were experiencing the last time they were in Vietnam. And to now see them dancing in this club, it's like, man, what, like, is that cathartic for them? Like, what is that like for them to be experiencing this in a whole new light here? And then all the way through to meeting the guide and getting the drinks from the other guys, and we just learned so much about the character there, like Paul, like not wanting to raise his glass to them because they are still the enemy, and the guy's just like, dude, there's no war right now. Like it's over. Like we can be okay. And we get so much information in those scenes. And I just like the carefree nature of the guys like dancing. It's just fun to see old guys dancing, it's kind of cool. So
totally.
That's what I would go with. And it keeps it, I guess, kind of, that's one of the last lighthearted moments, I guess, that we get, before like we're off on the adventure here. So that's what I would pick.
Yeah, I
am great pick.
Like that scene, the what you just talked about, how Paul like wouldn't raise his glass and stuff. Like Paul's character specifically is like perfectly tracks my enjoyment in the movie, because that scene, like I knew obviously what they were trying to say, like. He's got his PTSD. He can't get over the fact that like this is still the enemy to him. Whatever. I understood what they were trying to do. I just didn't believe the character. I just wasn't buying it yet.
Yeah.
But then the more and more it went along, like for whatever reason, he just like, I don't know. Maybe it was a me thing. I'm not really too sure. Maybe I was expecting something different, but I don't know. Just like the more I enjoyed Paul, the more I enjoyed the movie. Like, and I think that's the best. The best way I could describe why I picked him is my Apollonia, because like if I didn't start enjoying Paul, I wasn't going to like this movie. And
that's interesting.
At a certain point, the more and more that he went along and I got to know his character and started and like believed his character, then the more I loved the movie. That's and cool. It ended with just like, it's tragic the way it ends for Paul. I guess, I don't know if it's, I guess it's tragic.
Well, here's my thought though. Like when that's happening is like, if I know these people are going to shoot me anyway, I'm not digging my own grave. Like, no, you guys deal with this shit.
For sure.
Like,
yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I just mean like the fact that he was gunned down that way.
Yeah.
But like, I guess I don't know if it's tragic. I mean, maybe that was the release that he was looking for. Right.
Yeah. I mean, there's the triumph before that, the vision,
Yeah.
Totally. And he got to save his, like he essentially acted as decoy for his friends, like he was able to help his friends in a way so they could get to the temple, right? Because they got to the temple while they were looking for Paul.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Because they split the.
Yeah. So it's like.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like, I don't know. I just thought, I just really like Paul, man.
Yeah.
So I didn't like his character to start with, and then he ended up being my favorite part. So.
Nice. Yeah. Delroy is great. Well, I think we are going to head over to our Rushmore Mountain now.
These are OR scrubs.
Oh, are they?
This one felt pretty laid out to cover some Vietnam movies, for each of us to pick either our favorite or just one that we feel needs to be represented on the Rushmore. As usual, we're going to go ahead and throw Da 5 Bloods on there as the one that we're talking about this week. And then we're each going to pick another movie to come up with our 4 selections for this Rushmore. Matt, I'm going to throw it to you first. What is your Vietnam movie?
Oh man. Well, I think we got to go with Gump.
Got to do it.
Forrest Gump. Yeah, I said this earlier. I have not seen a ton of Vietnam movies.
Mm-hmm.
And the ones that you would pick typically and that you would think of when you think of Vietnam movies, I have not seen those. And so, but Forrest Gump is such a prominent, setting with Vietnam and some of the characters directly related to Vietnam that I gotta go with Forrest Gump. Lieutenant Dan, Bubba.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, at first I wanted to quibble because I'm like, we're not in Vietnam that much, but those characters are so integral to the rest of that story that without Vietnam, you don't have that story.
Yeah.
And so I pocketed my quibble. You don't have to hear it from me.
Pocket full of quibble. Tyler's over there with a pocket full of quibble.
That's about all I've gotten there.
That's awesome.
So speaking of things you could quibble about, I really want to nominate Tropic Thunder. I just don't know if it counts.
I mean, I guess it's shot in Vietnam, right? I guess I didn't clarify that it has to be Vietnam War. So yeah.
And it's about the Vietnam War,
movie.
Kind of.
Yeah.
I don't know if it counts. I'm quibbling myself here. Like, you guys are way nicer than me, but I'm just like,
I know,
it's a Vietnam movie, but
I mean, you're saying it, and I'm like, I'll count it.
Yeah.
I don't have any quibbles in my pocket.
We saw how my dad responded to Ready Player One as the Spielberg movie. So when he sees Tropic Thunder as the Vietnam movie, like, just wait for those comments, they're coming through.
You almost locked it in for me there. Like, because I mean, in all reality, like, I'm going to put, I have to put Platoon on here. You know what I mean? Like, I like it better than Full Metal Jacket. I've never seen The Deer Hunter yet. That almost made it its way into an episode of 3 Films and a Podcast, but I think it got bumped for something else. And yeah, I mean, I've seen Born on 4th of July. I've seen a lot of these, but of all of the ones that I've seen that aren't going to be picked by someone else, for me, I got to put Platoon on there. Nice. So I would watch Tropic Thunder 100 times before I watched Platoon again. Not that I didn't enjoy Platoon, but I just love Tropic Thunder. But I just don't think it deserves to be on a Vietnam War list over something like Platoon.
That makes sense.
And I want to be able to be civil with Leo the next time I see him. So
That's good. I think the Platoon, that was like you and I before, like, that was early on, right? When we were both just like nominating stuff. Yeah, we watched that. That was a good one.
That was like one of the first ones we watched, I think.
I think so. Yeah. That's a great selection. I love Full Metal Jacket. That's when I was going back and forth on. There's a lot of good movies out there. I have never seen Born on the 4th of July, but I have a very distinct memory that I was being babysat once, and my babysitter, she put this movie on and we watched it. And then I think there was a sex scene coming up, I would assume, because she made me like leave the room and then come back in later. And I've always been so intrigued about what it was that she made me leave for, and I don't know why I've never watched it to find out. Like, I'm sure at this point I'd be like, oh, that was it, but I was whatever, 8 or 9 at the time. She's like, probably shouldn't be in here. So I don't know.
I had a babysitter when I was probably, I don't know, 10 or something, like a summer, like she would hang out in the summer and watch us. And there was an Aerosmith video on at the time on MTV, and she made me leave the room every time.
Wow.
And she watched MTV all day, and that's all they played. So I had to leave the room like every 20 minutes. And she it took me so long to finally see this Aerosmith video. I wish I could remember which one it was. It ended up being so stupid. I was like, what the fuck was the deal here? Like, I'll try to find it while you're doing your
I wonder if it was like main one I think it was that crazy one. I think with Alicia Silverstone or something was in it, but I don't remember exactly. But
that must be it. I'll try to find it while you're talking.
So my selection is, I mean, I guess arguably one of the most notorious Vietnam movies of all time. It's Apocalypse Now. Man, this movie it's a movie, dude. It is so, there's so much that goes into this. Francis Ford Coppola directed, obviously a stellar cast with Martin Sheen and Robert Duvall, and I think one of Marlon Brando's last performances on screen, Lawrence Fishburne, a young Harrison Ford. If you want even younger than Han Solo, check this out. But yeah, I mean, it's a fantastic movie. I've seen it a couple times. There's so many different versions that you can check out, but there's such like a history behind the production of this. They shot this movie for 16 months, which is absurd. You know, like I think most movies get done in like 16 weeks, you know, like for maybe not something this level, but to shoot for almost a year and a half is insane. So there's so much footage. They've made a documentary on the making of it called Hearts of Darkness, which is also really, really good. But just some so interesting stories. Like there's the story of like Martin Sheen staying up for like 24 hours or 48 hours before he had to like shoot a scene where he's just like is sleep deprived and stuff. And just, I mean, there's so much that goes into it, but it's a great movie. It's an intense movie. And I think it needs to be on this list for sure. So if people haven't seen it, I think you should check it out if you have any interest in more Vietnam movies. Just gotta
really want to see Hearts of Darkness. I've never seen it.
Maybe we should do a documentary around, you know?
Shit.
Who knows? Who knows?
And it was the Living on the Edge video.
Living on the Edge. Okay.
Steven Tyler for the first little bit. He's like standing there naked, holding his own wiener.
Hell yeah. Okay. Doing his own little Chili Peppers impersonation or something.
Yeah, totally. And apparently that was just, that was too much for young Tyler. But then when I finally saw it, I was so disappointed. Unlike The Five Bloods, when I finally saw this, I was appointed.
Yes.
Was not disappointed.
No.
It's the fuck is wrong with me?
I don't know. I was like, it feels like a real Michael Scott-ism, you know. Maybe next time you will estimate me.
Thanks for letting me be on the podcast, guys.
Yeah, I love it. Do we have any final thoughts about The Five Bloods before we wrap up this episode? I think we've covered a lot of stuff. I know I mainly just really wanted to hit on that Marvin Gaye contribution to the soundtrack. Yeah. I think it was awesome. That acapella version of What's Going On it's beautiful, and it's fun. I think any excuse to watch a Spike Lee movie I'll take. So I was happy to be able to nominate this movie. But do you guys have anything else you want to talk about for The Five Bloods?
Yeah, I would just say to those who haven't watched it, I mean, take the cast, take Spike Lee, take the type of story that this is, the perspective that it is of, Black soldiers returning to Vietnam. That's a really unique story, and this is such an entertaining story and explores those things that we just don't hear a lot about or think a lot about, and so it's definitely worth the watch.
Yeah,
and it's a trip, and there's some heavy stuff in it, some heavy-handed themes as well, but it's just a great experience.
Yeah, very powerful for sure.
I guess I would say too, like, oh no, go ahead, Ben. Go ahead.
Oh, we even get a little bit of the glimpse of the side from the people in Vietnam who served. Their guide, his dad served and died, and the people who were trying to take the gold from them. It's like, well, we deserve it too because you guys fucked up our country. It's like, and they're not wrong. It's interesting to hear all these different perspectives of it.
I like that they call it the American War. That made me laugh.
Yeah.
I noticed that this movie gets like surprisingly poor ratings, like on IMDb and Letterboxd and stuff. I mean, not like bad ratings, but like on Letterboxd, there's like the bell curve. As soon as it hits 4 stars, it just drops. Like no one's rating this more than 4 stars on Letterboxd, which is fine. I didn't rate it more than 4 stars, but it's usually more of a linear curve, right?
Yeah.
And I would have to assume it's just because of the heavy-handed Black Lives Matter and Black history messaging and I guess like revisionist history that's going on. You know what I mean? Like, and by revisionist history, I mean, we're finally learning, or not finally learning, but it's just like we're hearing their story as opposed to just like the white man's Vietnam story, right?
Yeah.
So I don't mean revisionist history in the sense that they're getting it wrong. I just mean, I don't know. I just wonder if it's just the heavy-handedness is driving the ratings down. And I would hope that people can be a little more open-minded than that. Like, you have to understand, like, you're going into a Spike Lee movie. And if you don't know anything about Spike Lee, I guess that's fine. You got to start somewhere. But like, this is what he's been doing his entire career. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know how you could go into the movie that in my opinion was so well done and so compelling as The Five Bloods and give it any, and dock it because of the messaging and the heavy-handedness. And like, maybe that's not the reason. I mean, I gave it 3.5 stars. I feel like that's genuinely the rating I wanted to give it. But like, I think it just surprised me that there aren't more people giving higher ratings. And I just wonder if there's like some sort of, I don't know, like anti-Black Lives Matter brigade giving this thing bad ratings online. You know what I mean? This just seems strange to me.
Are you suggesting that angry white men will weaponize the internet to further their feelings?
What kind of accusation is this, Tyler?
That's really weird. I never would have thought of that before. I think
possible.
Yeah. The only person that we didn't shout out that I want to is good to see Jean Reno again. If you haven't seen Leon the Professional, go watch that because he's super awesome in that with Natalie Portman. But yeah, I think your point's right. Spike Lee is a very not subtle director, so that could have set people off. Along those lines, I work with someone who saw the Elvis movie, which I loved, and I asked them what they thought, and they just said like, "Oh, it's just like so chaotic and colorful and loud." And it's like, well, yeah, it's Baz Luhrmann. It's like,
have you seen Baz Luhrmann movie before?
Who that was, and I was like, well, yeah, I mean, if you've seen like Moulin Rouge or Romeo and Juliet, it's like, oh, okay, that makes more sense. It's like, yeah, I guess it's helpful to know who you're watching when you go into a movie. So I think knowing this was a Spike movie made a lot of difference, I guess.
Sorry, along those same lines, I went to my grandma's birthday dinner this weekend, and my aunt had just seen The Whale. I haven't seen it yet, but she had just seen it, and she was going on and on about how like great it was, but how dark and how sad it was. And I was like, well, yeah, it's an Aronofsky film. And there's like, they don't know what that means. I don't know that any of them have seen Black Swan or whatever. Like, I was like, it's
they're going to the
they never
Brendan
saw
Fraser
Pie
movie.
or they didn't watch Requiem for a Dream. Right. So it's like, exactly. They were just like, it's a Brendan Fraser movie. It's just like, it is helpful to know the director a little bit. You know what I mean? You're
without
adequately
doubt
prepared, but
Cool. Well, guys, this was fun to talk about.
Always.
This was a really great movie. I'm glad that I finally got to see it. I'm very excited for Matt's pick next week, where we will be covering Judas and the Black Messiah to wrap up our Black History Cinema round. So yeah, thanks everyone for joining us and for supporting us. We appreciate it, and we will see you all next week.
Mr. Brogan, I do believe you're fucked. Royally. Shit.